This is The World Today. Hello and thank you for joining us. I am Peninah Karibe. The fifth plenary session of the 20th Communist Party of China's Central Committee will be held in Beijing in October. This was decided at a CPC Central Committee Political Bureau meeting on Thursday. The Political Bureau will report its work to the CPC Central Committee, and the session will study major issues on advancing the party's full and rigorous self-governance. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, chaired the meeting. The meeting also analyzed and studied the current economic situation and made arrangements for economic work in the second half of this year. The Communist Party of China's Central Committee has held a symposium with non-CPC personages to seek opinions on the country's current economic situation and economic work for the second half of the year. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, presided over the symposium and delivered a speech. She stressed the need to maintain a steady economic approach while pursuing progress to fully implement the new development philosophy and to accelerate efforts to foster a new development dynamic. He also called for enhancing the effectiveness of macro policies, expanding domestic demand, and promoting deeper integration of technological and industrial innovation. The U.S. Central Command says American forces have carried out a new round of strikes on Iran following what they called the interception of a surprise Iranian attack on the U.S. military in the Middle East. As CENTCOM claims, it hit dozens of Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps targets. Iran says it has launched strikes on a U.S. airbase and the Central Command Center in Jordan. Aksan Kivani reports from Yazd.
IRGC says it struck a U.S. military command center and air base in Jordan with multiple missiles, ballistic missiles, early Wednesday, describing the attack as retaliation for aggressive actions by American forces. The IRGC says the retaliatory attack on Jordan is because of persistent threats posed by the U.S., warning that its resistance will continue as long as U.S. threats and illegal interventions against Iran continue, in fact. While everyone is talking about a 3-day pause in U.S. strikes, Iran's state television claims the northwestern Iranian province of West Azerbaijan, a border city named Piran Shah, was targeted with American projectiles. The report says the missile struck an uninhabited area and caused no casualties so far.
Explosions have been reported on Iran's Qashm Island following fresh U.S. strikes against Iran. Iran has been accused of launching missiles at U.S. forces in the Middle East, with President Donald Trump vowing to hit the country hard in retaliation. The U.S. has also carried out joint airstrikes with Saudi Arabia against Iran-linked militants in Iraq. This marks the first time Saudi Arabia has publicly announced its participation in strikes alongside the United States. Jagruti Davi reports from Washington.
There were always fears that the conflict would widen across the region, and we're seeing a sign of that with US and Saudi Arabia conducting joint airstrikes against Iran-backed groups in Iraq. They say that the IRGC had directed their proxies in Iraq to attack US forces and Saudi Arabian energy infrastructure, and so US CENTCOM says it and Saudi Arabia conducted joint airstrikes targeting weapons and logistics sites in eastern Iraq. It is asking Iran and its proxies to stop their attacks to avoid any further repercussions. US President Donald Trump was asked on Fox News about new Iranian strikes against US forces and in what the US response would be, and he said that we'll be hitting them very hard. And of course, we're seeing the wider global ramifications of all of this, as well as the cessation of any kind of pause in fighting. We're also seeing oil prices climb time on the resumption of those hostilities again. Benjamin Netanyahu continues to characterize the talks that he had with President Trump as a conversation of mutual support and understanding. Many observers note that the two started out on equal footing, with both of them launching those attacks against Iran together. But since then, their war aims appear to have diverged, with the president at times favoring diplomacy over more sustained attacks that the Israeli leader may have wanted. The president at least promised to get to end soon, and that has not yet materialized.
Iraq's al-Nujaba movement has warned the US and Saudi Arabia of consequences following their joint strikes in Iraq. Al-Nujaba movement is designated as a terrorist group by the United States. It is part of the Popular Mobilization Forces, a network of Shia majority factions established in 2014 to fight the Islamic State group. The attacks have heightened regional tensions and prompted Iraq's Prime Minister to cancel a planned visit to Saudi Arabia. CGTN's Mikhail David has the details.
Iraq awoke to a sharp escalation in regional tensions after Saudi Arabia, in coordination with the United States, launched strikes on Iraq's al-Nujaba movement that it accused of carrying out a series of drone attacks on the kingdom's energy infrastructure. Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF, said at least 20 of its members were killed and dozens injured in strikes targeting several of its bases. At funerals in Baghdad, mourners carried coffins draped in Iraqi and Iranian flags, chanting slogans against the United States and Saudi Arabia. Baghdad condemned the joint strikes as a violation of Iraq's sovereignty, while urging all sides to avoid further escalation. Meanwhile, the Islamic resistance in Iraq gave the government an August 6th deadline to demonstrate it can defend the country's sovereignty, warning that its response would otherwise be inevitable.
This aggression will not go unpunished. It was not only an attack on the Popular Mobilization Forces, it was an attack on all of Iraq, on its political system and its sovereignty. We are an integral part of the Iraqi state, and this attack targeted Iraq as a whole.
In Mosul, the aftermath revealed the escalation of the destruction. Burned out vehicles, damaged buildings, and scattered debris remained as some Iraqi lawmakers called for a tougher response.
We demanded that the Iraqi government immediately cut diplomatic and economic relations with Saudi Arabia and expel the Saudi ambassador. If these strikes are ignored, more will follow, and they may be even stronger.
One political analyst says the latest strikes could mark a broader shift in the regional conflict, with implications extending well beyond Iraq.
It's clear that the conflict has shifted from proxy warfare to direct confrontation. These strikes also reflect a shift in how the Gulf states are positioning themselves toward Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. It is becoming increasingly difficult for Iraq to remain on the sidelines, as it has become part of the broader confrontation between the United States and Iran.
Iraqi officials say they are now preparing a broader security plan aimed at strengthening control on the ground, safeguarding the country's sovereignty, and preventing Iraqi territory from being used to threaten neighboring states. Mikhail David, CGTN.
Two ships, including a US-owned gas storage tanker, caught fire after an explosion at an Egyptian port on Wednesday. British maritime security firm Ambri says the blast was caused by a drone attack. Egypt's petroleum ministry has confirmed the fire but made no mention of a drone attack and did not say what caused the incident. Analysts say the attack is not likely to affect global energy markets, as Egypt is not a major natural gas exporter. The death toll from earthquakes in southwestern Japan's Kumamoto prefecture has risen to 30. A magnitude 5.8 earthquake struck the area on Wednesday night, just one day after a magnitude 6.8 quake hit the same region. Shin Ham reports from Kumamoto.
When my crew and I arrived here in Kumamoto Prefecture yesterday, we were all startled late last night when all our phones rang with a high-pitched alert. And seconds later, literally, we felt that tremor, and it later turned out to be that magnitude 5 aftershock. We're coming up on 48 hours now, but the search and rescue efforts continue, particularly over at that large shopping mall where that large explosion occurred. According to the operator of that shopping mall, 3 of its workers still remain unaccounted for. 8 had been pulled from the rubble. And just to give you a sense of where I'm standing right now, I'm in the township of Uki in Kumamoto Prefecture. I'm at a local community center where an evacuation shelter has been set up. People coming here to get water because basic necessities are still not in hand. The entire economy of this area, the industries that have been affected, a paper mill factory collapsed. The chimney there collapsed, trapping its workers, where 5 people lost their lives, and search and rescue efforts continue there as well. But of course, here in southern Japan, it's home to a lot of also automobile facilities. Toyota has seen its productions at its motorcycle facilities here delayed through Friday, and semiconductors, of course, a big industry here with Tokyo Electron and Sony Semiconductors also seeing delays in production through Friday.
Political divisions over the COVID-19 pandemic are once again in the spotlight in Washington. Former U.S. infectious disease chief Dr. Anthony Fauci, who oversaw the country's response to the crisis, repeatedly invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination during a Senate hearing. Committee Chairman Republican Senator Rand Paul says he will seek a vote next week to hold Fauci in contempt of Congress, a move that could ultimately be referred to the Justice Department for possible criminal proceedings. Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal condemned the hearing, saying attacks on Fauci were part of a larger campaign against science and facts that has made Americans less safe. And that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from around the continent and Africa Live. I'll see you in a bit. Thanks for watching.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time? Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
The United Nations continues to call for more international support in ending the Ebola outbreak in the DRC. Regional leaders gather in Uganda to discuss the future of the AU mission in war-torn Somalia. And the UN Security Council votes to extend sanctions in the Central African Republic. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the program. I am Peninah Karibe. Also coming up this hour, the Angolan Kwanza joins the South African rand as the region's settlement currency. In sports, we'll have the latest on FIFA President Infantino's controversial plans to sell a portion of the World Cup to private investors. We begin with the Ebola outbreak in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Top UN officials continue to warn that the gap between the epidemic and response is widening, with cases essentially doubling every 20 days. The outbreak, which was first reported in mid-May, is also said to be worsening hunger in the region, with an estimated 10 million people affected. CGTN's David Mbithi reports.
The current Ebola outbreak, which is spreading in the conflict-torn Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, has brought a major international response. Donors have pledged over $900 million to fight the outbreak, with foreign public health experts and humanitarians joining efforts on the front line. But despite this, senior UN officials say the outlook, more than 2 months into the outbreak, remains worrying.
In the last 24 hours, 50 people have died of Ebola in Congo. And the number of cases is growing exponentially, doubling every 20 days. This is a far faster growth than the growth in our response.
The officials were speaking from the city of Bunia in Ituri province. Accounting for 90% of all confirmed cases, Bunia continues to be the hardest hit province. More than 3,000 cases have now been confirmed. Roughly half of them have resulted in deaths. And now another concern. The outbreak is said to be contributing to worsening food insecurity in the region.
Food is essential in this response. You cannot force people to choose between hunger and health.
Ituri and 2 other neighboring provinces were already facing a humanitarian crisis due to rebel violence that escalated in January of last year. The long-running conflict has forced millions into hunger, with nearly 2 million people in desperate need of food assistance in Ituri.
Some 5 million people are in emergency levels of food insecurity, and there are also pockets of disaster level food insecurity. Now with the Ebola crisis, this is getting worse. This is a crisis on top of a crisis.
The WFP is urging member states and all stakeholders to scale up the response and finally help the DRC to flatten the curve. David Mbithi, CGTN.
We're joined by Dr. Agbor Ebuta, global health expert, to discuss this further. He's joining us from Abuja in Nigeria. Dr. Ebuta, thank you for your time this afternoon. Why is this outbreak spreading faster than previous ones?
Thank you for having me. The outbreak, we will remember that at the beginning of this outbreak, at the time it was declared formally, we were 2 to 3 months behind schedule. It means that this virus had a field day and was spreading significantly. This is against the backdrop that we already had an existing humanitarian crisis as a result of the mining activities and the security breakdown in the Northeast Democratic Republic of Congo, where we have at least 4 non-state actors, rebel groups that are playing significant contributing significantly to the security, poor security situation. And to highlight this further, as recent as a few days ago, we had some health workers attacked in the Yakunda area of Bunia. This highlights that these security challenges continue to contribute to undermining the effort. The other factor, obviously, is the fact that community mistrust continues unabated. We have it on record that at least 25 to 33%, that is 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 of the people in the Democratic Republic of Congo do not believe that there is an outbreak. They think it is made up. They also think that the outbreak may actually be other health conditions like malaria and typhoid. We do know that malaria prevalence is 50% in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and even worse in the Ituri province. So all of this contributes significantly. We have seen significant commitment to funds to this project, but we have failed to see how these funds have connected to actual interventions at the forefront of where the intervention is required.
Well, we do know that this isn't the first time that the DRC is encountering this the Ebola virus. And also we're hearing from top UN officials who are warning that the gap between the epidemic and response is widening. They're giving very, very concerning statistics. Cases essentially doubling every 20 days. So what are some of the factors that are making this particular virus so difficult to contain?
Well, the first thing is that this virus is, we've only known this virus for 19 years, and there's been no serious effort to develop a vaccine or medications to mitigate it. Unlike the Zaire strain of the virus, where we already have a vaccine, and this vaccine has played significant role in mitigating the spread and the reoccurrence of the Ebola driven by the Zaire strain. So we don't have a vaccine, and we don't have clear interventions. The second factor, obviously, is the fact that because it is a relatively new virus, we do have a significant percentage of the populations who are not immune. They have not developed significant immunity, both cellular-based and humoral immunity, that are important in undermining the spread of viruses and outbreaks like this, because you do need a significant percentage of your population, about 70%, who have some form of immunity to mitigate outbreaks. Another factor, obviously, which I've mentioned earlier, is the community mistrust. Over about 30% of the population still believe that there is no outbreak, so they still keep their sick relatives and friends at home. They do not present in the hospital, and most times by the time they present in the hospital, it's late. Even when they get to the hospital, we have significant challenges with resources, training, and the availability of health workers. So far, we have lost about 36 health workers in the northeastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo just to Ebola, this particular outbreak. So all of this continues to undermine and to drive the progress of this virus. Another important factor is that when you have a case of, you have about 3,400 documented cases of outbreak, you should have a commensurate number of about 1 to 40 ratio. So we should be looking at around 140 people, 40,000, 130,000 people on our contact tracing list. What we have now is about less than 13,000, about 12,000 plus people. So we have over 80, 90,000 people that are not being contact traced. And if you look at a population of 80, 90,000 people, maybe 100,000 people that are not being formally contact traced, the data we have is about 1 to 10% of that population would have Ebola and will continue to drive it at the community. So speaking from that data, we roughly have about 1,000 to 10,000 people as we speak with Ebola in the community that are driving this outbreak.
Dr. Ebuta, allow me to ask one more question, because you have mentioned that part of the reason why this is spreading so quickly is because people don't really believe that this is an Ebola outbreak. Yet this is a population that has encountered Ebola before. One would imagine that they are familiar with the symptoms, they're familiar with the fatality rates of this virus outbreak. So why is there this disbelief about Ebola? Does that speak to a lack of, sensitizing the population about the disease, or what is it exactly? What are we missing?
Well, it's a bit complicated. Before practices and behavioral tendencies of population that affect their health indices emerge, most times it is driven by knowledge and attitude. Over time, their knowledge, attitude, behavior, and practices have been entrenched in a particular direction. 80% of people in the Democratic Republic of Congo, when they get ill, they present at their traditional healing native witch doctor for treatment. They present at local chemists and do not go to formal orthodox health facilities for proper diagnosis. So all of that has played a factor. The second factor has been the fact that they have failed to adopt the WHO and the African CDC recommended burial protocol. Africans generally want to interact with the dead bodies as part of the ritual of final commission to Mother Earth. So the restrictions by WHOs are not being adopted. So people also feel that to a large extent, Ebola truly does not exist, and you cannot stop them from organizing the burials the way they want to, and you cannot force them to come to the hospital if they are ill, because they would naturally suspect that they have malaria or typhoid, which is high in this area. And in addition to that, they also believe that there may be other foreign interests. Some people believe that the WHO and the non-governmental organization and humanitarian interventions have all their pecuniary reasons why they are intervening in the democratic. They are doing that for their personal reasons and collecting intelligence for other purposes. So all of this plays a significant role in driving the current outbreak.
Well, thank you very much for breaking it down for us. Dr. Agbo Ebucha speaking to us there from Abuja in Nigeria. Meanwhile, in the DRC, surveillance teams say they are overstretched as they continue to battle the fastest growing Ebola outbreak on record. Resource shortages, delayed data and community resistance are among challenges they face in response efforts. Here's CGTN Sophia Shimichero with more.
Today, Mubarak Kano, a member of the Community Alert and Monitoring Team in Bunia, has to start his patrols using his own personal means. On a good day, there are only 4 cars available to ferry the team around the city, and this poses a challenge to their tracking efforts.
Given that we have a slight logistical problem, if we were to wait to hire a vehicle for the response, we might not be able to set off until around 11 a.m. or 12 noon, whereas we have to submit the results by 12 noon or 12:30 p.m.
From one health facility after another, Kano carefully scans handwritten entries in the consultation register looking for any suspected cases.
We have just identified someone who meets the case definition and who went on their own to the Elisha Treatment Center run by MSF. Even before our arrival, the patient and their family had decided to go there. As for us, we will simply record this as an alert, and we will contact the Elisha Treatment Center to carry out a more in-depth investigation.
However, despite efforts to make the rounds, underreporting remains a blind spot. Frontline workers report cases where results come in late or patients refuse to be tested, which derails contact tracing efforts and, in the long run, masks the true scale of the outbreak.
As a data manager, I decided to go into the field myself to better understand the situation and report the data in real time through the chat system. At the moment, investigators are conducting probes, reporting alerts, and then sending the forms back to the central office for data entry. However, this is not the best approach if we want to have real-time data.
Additionally, like many other frontline workers, Kano says the team has been working without pay and risk allowances since the outbreak began. This recently triggered a protest last Saturday, disrupting health operations in the region. Now, the Congolese Health Ministry said the government is working to address lack of payment issues. Sophia Shimichero, CGTN.
Now to Uganda, where the African Union's Support and Stabilization Mission in Somalia, or AUSOM, is in the spotlight. The mission is aimed at degrading the threat of Al-Shabaab militants and protecting the lives of ordinary people. However, despite some hard-won gains, it continues to face massive funding problems. Heads of state from 7 troop-contributing countries, alongside senior officials from the African Union, the United Nations and IGAD, are meeting in Kampala to discuss this problem and find a way forward. For more on this meeting, let's bring in Dr. Hassan Hanenje, the Director, Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, who's based right here in Nairobi. Dr. Hanenje, it's nearly 20 years now since the AU peace mission began in Somalia. Is this mission still necessary, or should Somalia secure itself?
Ideally, Somalia should be able to secure itself by now, except that it is not there yet. And I think we are about 3 to 5 years before actually Somalia can be able to gain the kind of capacity, both institutionally as well as security-wise, to be able to do that. And so to the extent that right now is facing a crisis, I think is something concerning, considering the general state.
We are sorry about that. We've lost that connection with Dr. Hanenje. We'll try and reconnect with him and get his insights on that topic in just a short while. For now, let's focus on the 49th African Union Executive Council session, which concludes in Addis Ababa. Foreign ministers have reinforced their commitments to advancing the bloc's integration agenda and strengthening its institutional reforms. From the Ebola outbreak in the DRC to the xenophobic attacks in South Africa, the Council also confronted some of the continent's most pressing crises. Becca Atoma reports from Addis Ababa.
While much of the discussion during the 2 days of the 49th Africa Union Executive Council meeting focused on the Union's financial independence, advancing continental integration and strengthening the bloc's institutional reforms received no less emphasis. In his closing remarks, Chairperson of the AU Executive Council and Burundi's Foreign Minister Ambassador Eduardo Bizimana highlighted the importance of AU member states working in tandem.
Plus que jamais, le renforcement de notre intégration régionale.
More than ever, strengthening our regional integration through close cooperation among member states, regional economic communities, regional mechanisms, and the institutions of our Union remains the key to accelerating the realization of the aspirations of Agenda 2063 and to building a more integrated, more prosperous, more resilient Africa that is truly master of its own destiny.
Enhancing coordination among member states and promoting collective action to address the continent's most pressing issues, such as the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa, were among the issues discussed.
This matter should not be left to the DRC or Uganda to fight it alone. Ourselves as member states of the AU needs to support that efforts, and we also stated that as South Africa, we have also supported the work of the Africa CDC. We will continue to support it through an amount that we have submitted, donated of about $13 million is to demonstrate that we must fund our own initiatives, while partners come support. The core of the funding should come from us.
Whilst the DRC is still fighting the Ebola epidemic, Uganda is now firmly on the road to recovery. However, the ministers were not in agreement on all issues, with the xenophobic attacks in South Africa being a point of debate. After extended deliberations, the Council declined Ghana's proposal for the matter to be discussed at the continental level.
We were very clear as the South African government that we have condemned all forms of xenophobia and any related intolerance in South Africa. And we have been very clear that people are now being arrested for taking the law into their own hands. About 82 people have been arrested, and now the situation is stable. Therefore, a discussion of this nature will be divisive.
Despite differences on some issues, the 49th AU Executive Council concluded with broad consensus on strengthening African solidarity and reinforcing Africa's common positions on regional and global issues. The decisions adopted during the meeting will now be forwarded to the Assembly of Heads of State and Government, where they are expected to shape key decisions on the future direction of the African Union. Becca Atoma, CGTN, Addis Ababa.
The United Nations Security Council has unanimously adopted a resolution extending sanctions on the Central African Republic until July 31st, 2027, citing the continued threat posed by armed groups in the country. The Council says despite progress in improving security, the situation remains fragile and armed groups continue to undermine stability. Before the vote, France's ambassador to the UN, Jérôme Bonafont, said the international community has a responsibility to support the Central African Republic in its fight against armed groups. Following the adoption of the resolution, the country's UN ambassador welcomed the decision, saying closer cooperation between the government and international partners has delivered tangible progress in restoring peace and security.
Des progrès importants ont été réalisés en République centrafricaine ces derniers temps.
Significant progress has been made in the Central African Republic in recent years, in democratic governance, in the peace process, and the restoration of state authority throughout the country. Despite this, the security situation remains fragile due to the persistent activity of armed groups. especially in the border areas in the northeast and southeast of the country. The attack in Amdafok on the 30th of June is an illustration of this. In these circumstances, it's the responsibility of the Council to continue to support the Central African Republic in the fight against armed groups and associated individuals who continue to threaten the stability of the country.
Progress achieved show that close cooperation at all levels can produce specific results, even in the context as complex as the one in CAR. However, this progress should not lead us to think that all of the instability factors have disappeared.
Here in Kenya, wildlife authorities are investigating the deaths of 15 elephants in the Amboseli ecosystem over the past month, with a toxic substance reported to be found in preliminary tests. The Kenya Wildlife Service says 10 of the elephants showed similar symptoms, including partial paralysis, before dying within 24 to 48 hours. The deaths were recorded in Amboseli National Park, Kimana Sanctuary and Kuku Ranch near the Tanzanian border. Most of the affected animals were adult females and calves. Further tests are underway, including the examination of water sources and other environmental factors. Authorities say there is currently no evidence the incident poses any risk to human health. A job offer, a scholarship, or the promise of a better life. For many young people, it begins with a message on a screen. But behind some of these online opportunities are human traffickers using social media to recruit, deceive, and exploit. As the world marks World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, this year's campaign highlights the growing link between human trafficking and online scams. Lena Ingwenyiba reports from Banjul in the Gambia.
For many young Gambians, social media has become more than just a space to connect with friends. It is where they search for jobs, scholarships, and opportunities abroad. But in the same digital spaces where opportunities exist, traffickers are also hiding, using fake job alerts, travel offers, and recruitment schemes to lure victims. The question is, when that opportunity appears on your screen, do you verify it or do you simply click?
I've seen a lot of job offers on social media, and I've also recommended some to my friends as well. Basically, I do my investigations. The social media is a very wide space. Anything you want to know, you would see there, be it TikTok, Instagram, even on Google. So I try as much as possible to investigate the company.
For some trafficking survivors, what began as the promise of employment or a better future quickly turned into a nightmare. Experts say traffickers often spend time building trust before revealing their true intentions.
So traffickers are not people that we don't know. They're always people that we know, people that we eat with, people that we play with, people that we work with. At times, they even have relatives. Obviously, they're people that can get after us easily.
More than 60% of the Gambia's population is under the age of 25, making it one of Africa's youngest populations. While the latest labor force survey shows unemployment has declined, many young people remain in vulnerable or low-quality jobs, leaving them eager for better opportunities.
Human trafficking is not a crime that you will say is not my business. It becomes everybody's business. So community is part of the game. Community needs to strengthen the information, need to do their own advocacy at local level.
Job agrees that support is key.
I didn't receive any reintegration support from anybody. I helped myself recover. I helped myself get up onto that ground and come up from my uncomfort zones. And from there, I decided this was something that I want to do for the rest of my life, advocating for the life of migrant survivors. So peer-to-peer support that I get from the survivors as well, it's something that built my confidence and supported me a lot.
And while traffickers' methods may be changing, the warning signs often remain the same, making digital awareness one of the best forms of prevention.
Education is very important, and we need to learn how to recognize common warning signs such as pressure. So there are 5 golden rules, I would say. Always stop and think before acting, verify before trusting, never share a password or a PIN with anyone, always be suspicious of urgency, and report any suspicious activity.
As traffickers strengthen their operations online, authorities say awareness must evolve just as quickly. In a country where thousands of young people turn to the internet in search of opportunity, knowing how to identify a fake offer may be the difference between finding a future and becoming a victim. Lena Igwanyiba, CGTN Banjul.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in business news. The Angolan Kwanza joins the South African rand as the region's settlement currency. And Morocco tightens its grip on subsidized flour as it looks to build its first strategic grain reserve.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
South Sudan's president has dismissed the country's central bank governor in what is the latest in a series of sackings and reshuffles in the senior ranks of his government. Salva Kiir did not give a reason for the sacking of Johnny Ohisa. He's being replaced by Addis Ababa Otho, who held the same position for 6 months last year. In recent months, Kiir has made a series of sweeping changes to his government, which many analysts say signals an effort to consolidate power amid succession uncertainty. Ohisa, an economist who has served multiple terms as central bank governor in the past, was reappointed earlier this year. The U.S. is seeking a role for its companies in Ethiopian Airlines' massive Bishoftu Airport project as Washington vies with other powers for infrastructure and investment influence in Africa. Work on the 4-runway airport, about 45 kilometers southeast of Addis Ababa, began in January. Officials say they want it to become the Dubai of Africa when it's completed in 2030. The U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce for the Middle East and Africa said Washington was closely engaged in pushing to secure U.S. participation in the $12.5 billion project. Mark Mitchell did not specify what role U.S. companies could play in the project, but said it could lead to more Boeing aircraft powered by GE Aerospace engines. In April, Ethiopian Airlines agreed to buy 6 additional Boeing 787 and 9 Dreamliners on top of the 20 jets it already ordered. The African Development Bank has pledged $500 million to the project and is leading efforts to raise $8.7 billion. Southern Africa's financial landscape is undergoing a major shift. The Angolan Kwanza has officially become the region's second settlement currency after the South African rand. Analysts say the move offers regional markets greater choice while driving down transactional costs. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
For more than a decade, the South African rand has dominated cross-border trade in southern Africa. Now, Angola's Kwanza is joining as a settlement currency, a move that could make doing business across the region faster, simpler, and a step closer to deeper regional integration.
The Kwanza's inclusion on the SADC real-time gross settlement platform marks an aggressive push by Luanda to modernize its financial architecture and embed its currency into the regional supply chain.
A entrada do Kwanza como moeda de liquidação.
The inclusion of the Kwanza as a settlement currency in the SADC RTGS system represents a particularly significant achievement for Angola. With this integration, economic operators, businesses and citizens alike will benefit from faster, more secure and more efficient cross-border payments.
Central bankers view the expansion as a vital tool to deepen economic resilience across the bloc.
This is not simply the addition of another settlement currency. It is a practical step towards a Southern Africa that is more integrated, more connected, and better able to support trade, investment, financial stability, and shared prosperity.
The infrastructure is already vast, linking over 80 commercial banks across 15 nations. Bypassing third-party foreign currencies is expected to trigger immediate efficiency gains.
One of the things that you come in as a settlement currency is that it is starting to push the issue of convertibility, because I must be able to get out of Kwanza to get into rand and be able to get out of rand into Kwanza without having to go via Europe or via the US or via Asia. If African trade is settled and invoiced in our own currencies, it makes payments cheaper.
The network is poised to grow further, with Botswana and Mozambique waiting in the wings to digitize retail and low-value transactions.
We're building a faster payments, regional faster payments platform called Transactions Cleared on an Immediate Basis. It's for everyday transactions like remittances. So you can imagine that when you have the other currencies on board, the ability to send a transaction from Namibia to South Africa, from Botswana to Mozambique in real time.
The expansion of settlement currencies marks another step towards making African trade faster, cheaper, and more efficient. It's a vision that featured prominently on South Africa's G20 agenda. But the ambition goes beyond Southern Africa in order to build a seamless continental payment system that deepens integration as Africa moves towards a fully operational free trade area. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town.
Morocco is tightening its grip on subsidized flour as it looks to build its first strategic grain reserve. Officials say the reforms are aimed at shielding consumers from supply shocks. However, local bakers warn that surging energy, labor and transport costs are already crushing their already razor-thin margins. CGTN's Adnel Shawashi reports.
Morocco's heavy reliance on grain imports leaves its domestic economy highly exposed to severe droughts and erratic global commodity markets. To cushion the blow, Rabat is pivoting toward long-term storage infrastructure.
For the first time, Morocco is moving to establish grain reserves sufficient to cover national demand for several months. The measure is a major step toward reinforcing food sovereignty.
But stabilizing supply is only half the battle. Balances must be struck between keeping bread affordable and preventing the state's subsidy bill from ballooning under high shipping and freight costs.
The new rules also strengthen oversight of the supply chain, tracking subsidized flour from mills to bakeries. The aim is to ensure the flour reaches its intended beneficiaries while preventing speculation and diversion.
For ordinary citizens, the state interventions have successfully averted the kind of food inflation seen elsewhere across the continent.
Despite the disruption caused by the conflict in Ukraine, we have not encountered any supply problems. Fortunately, subsidized flour and bread has remained consistently available.
Yet this price stability comes at a cost, mostly borne by the private sector. Bakers are trapped between a hard price cap and rising overheads.
Shrinking margins combined with the continued rise in production costs, including energy and labor, leaves us caught in a difficult position of keeping bread affordable while ensuring that the bakeries remain financially viable.
Morocco's structural reforms aim to make the subsidy system more targeted, transparent and resilient. Their success will hinge on protecting household purchasing power while ensuring mills and bakeries can continue operating without losses. Adan Shawishi, CGTN.
This is Africa Live. Coming up in sports, we'll have the latest on FIFA President Gianni Infantino's controversial plans to sell a portion of the World Cup to private investors.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa. So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
We start with an update from the Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco. Cameroon and Ghana got their Group D campaigns off the mark with victories over Mali and debutants Cape Verde in Casablanca. The indomitable Lionesses claimed a hard-fought 2-1 victory over their West African rivals in an entertaining encounter. Nga Manga struck twice in both halves, including the winner from the sport in the final quarter. Assata Traore had levelled matters on the half-hour mark when she won and converted a penalty. In the second match, Doris Bodouar gave the Black Queens the perfect start after 6 minutes. They doubled their lead early in the second half when Cape Verde defender Eleia Vieira scored an own goal. The results leave Ghana top of Group D on goal difference from Cameroon. Group A returns on Thursday with Kenya and Senegal desperately needing a win at the Olympic Stadium in Rabat. Both lost their opening games on Sunday and know a second defeat would likely end their chances of making the knockout rounds. Speaking on Thursday, Kenya Harambee Starlets head coach Beldin Odemba says her side understand the jeopardy involved.
It's do or die for us tomorrow. So we're really working hard to ensure that we keep on staying here in Morocco, and we shall give our best tomorrow. How do I know Senegal? I've watched their matches, and I can say that their physicality is what they have. They run, they are well built, and they use that as their advantage. So we already understand what they're bringing, and we are looking forward for a good game tomorrow.
And later on, hosts Morocco take on North African neighbours Algeria at the Stade Moulay Hassan Stadium in Rabat. Victory could guarantee the victors a place in quarterfinals with a game to spare. Morocco are coached by the experienced Touhé Wilder, who led his native Spain to the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup title. They beat Kenya 4-0 in their opener, while Algeria took care of Senegal. The Atlas Lionesses have never won the Women's AFCON but reached the last two finals on home soil. Now to the story making the big headlines in football. FIFA's president has hit back at critics after the world governing body announced a controversial plan this week to sell a major stake in future World Cups and other FIFA events to private investors. Gianni Infantino says that at this stage, they plan to establish the so-called FIFA Forward Enterprise, or FFE, is just a proposal, but one which could benefit the evolution of the game. European football governing body UEFA earlier slammed the plan, accusing FIFA of, quote, enriching themselves and their friends. It has called for an emergency meeting of its 55 members and, according to reliable reports, European nations could even boycott the World Cup should the proposal go ahead. In response, Infantino, who has been at the helm of FIFA for a decade, stated that the plans are not yet cast in stone, adding that the relevant confederations will be consulted. He also gave football associations until the 19th September to back his plan with a $40 million incentive to accept.
It is a golden opportunity to turbocharge the development of the game globally. But again, it is just an offer, not an obligation. It would simply commercialize and organize all FIFA-owned competitions, along with sponsorship, broadcast licensing, and new venture for the benefit of FIFA's 211 member associations.
The Confederation of African Football President Patrice Motsepe will host a meeting of his executive committee next week to assess and evaluate Infantino's controversial proposal. In a statement released on Thursday, the Continental Governing Body also encouraged its members to, quote, examine the FFA proposal and participate in the consultation process in accordance with CAF and FIFA's regulations and established procedures. CAF has broken ranks with other confederations who have openly opposed the plan by adding it will work with all stakeholders in support of increasing financial and other resources for the development and growth of football in Africa and worldwide. Both CONCACAF and AFC have joined UEFA in slamming Infantino's controversial plan. CONCACAF, the body that helms North and Central America, as well as the Caribbean football federations, voiced deep alarm over how the plan was handled, saying it was concerned by the lack of due process. The Asian Football Confederation echoed the concerns over transparency. Elsewhere, Brazil head coach Carlo Ancelotti hopes FIFA will not ruin the World Cup with their plans to sell off a stake in the tournament to investors. The Italian was speaking in Rio de Janeiro a few weeks after Brazil's 2026 World Cup dream ended in the last 16 with defeat to Norway.
I believe that the World Cup is the World Cup and it belongs to the fans, to the people, to all the peoples of the world. It's a truly beautiful moment. I hope that neither UEFA nor FIFA will ruin this celebration for the whole world.
The director of sports at Bayern Munich is among many to criticize FIFA's plan. Max Eberl was speaking on Wednesday as the Bundesliga champions unveiled Nathaniel Brown as a new signing from Eintracht Frankfurt.
To be honest, I find it shameful and I'm ashamed that we are even discussing such ideas in football. Football, as the fans here have already said, doesn't belong to us. It's a game, and as far as I'm concerned, FIFA is there to oversee the game, to establish its structure and rules, and to organize World Cups. At the moment, I get the feeling that FIFA is only there to make a profit. I mean, it feels as though they're just trying to make money through every possible channel.
Over in North America, Son Heung-min scored twice in quick succession as the peak of the MLS League in the U.S. beat their counterparts from Mexico's Liga MX. The Mexican All-Stars went ahead after 9 minutes through Luis Rey, but 2 quick goals midway through the first half from the South Korean, so the Americans take control. The MLS All-Stars pulled further ahead through Philip Ziconagel's 42nd minute goal. Salomon Rondon pulled one back just before the hour mark before Evander Ferreira restored the 2-goal cushion. A late strike for Jose Paradella and the Liga MX made things interesting in the final moments, but the MLS All-Stars held on for the narrow victory. Elsewhere, Borussia Dortmund's pre-season preparations hit another bump after they lost 1-0 to Japan's Cerezo Osaka. Former Dortmund midfielder Shinji Kagawa lined up against his old club in a match where Solomon Sakuragawa's 8th-minute header proved decisive. The defeat follows last weekend's 2-1 friendly loss to Fortuna Düsseldorf, leaving Niko Kova's side searching for their first win in 3 matches. Dortmund wrap up their Japan tour against the FC Tokyo on Saturday before facing Arsenal in the Emirates Cup final in London. And that's what we leave it on this edition of Africa Live. Just send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.
Live from CGTN Beijing, this is Asia Today.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us. It's 7 p.m. here in the Chinese capital. Coming up on our program, China outlines economic priorities for the second half of 2026 and convenes the 5th plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee in October. Tensions rise. The U.S. strikes Iranian Revolutionary Guards in the new wave of attacks. Rescue workers battle to reach survivors. The death toll from an earthquake in Japan's Kumamoto prefecture rises to 34. We'll begin here in the Chinese capital, where China has announced it will hold the 5th plenary session of the 20th Communist Party of China Central Committee in Beijing in October. The decision was made at a CPC Central Committee Political Bureau meeting. The meeting also analyzed and studied the current economic situation and make arrangements for economic work in the second half of this year. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, chaired the meeting.
The meeting noted positive economic momentum of the nation with new drivers emerging and structure improving, while acknowledging difficulties and challenges. It called for confidence and proactive steps toward high-quality development. It urged better coordination of domestic and international imperatives, balancing development and security, deepening reform and opening up, and accelerating the shift from old to new growth drivers. The meeting called for a more proactive fiscal policy and moderately loose monetary policy, boosting domestic demand, optimizing supply, improving people's livelihoods, and striving for a strong start to the 15th five-year plan period. On macro policy, the meeting urged to accelerate the disbursement of fiscal funds and bonds proceeds with flexible adjustments to monetary policy tools. To expand domestic demand, the meeting emphasized deepening the AI Plus initiative, improving AI governance, building new pillar industries, and upgrading traditional industries. The meeting highlighted a fair and orderly market competition environment, formulating regulations for a unified national market, deepening reforms of state-owned enterprises, and optimizing the environment for the private sector. It also stressed expanding international trade cooperation, promoting balanced trade, and actively attracting foreign investment. On agriculture, the meeting urged stable income growth for farmers and solid production for a full-year grain harvest. It called for multiple measures to strengthen social security, especially protecting the rights of workers in flexible and new forms of employment. The meeting also stressed ecological protection and advancing carbon peaking and carbon neutrality. The meeting emphasized stabilizing the real estate market, pushing reforms and risk resolution for small and medium-sized financial institutions, and enhancing capital market resilience and confidence. It also called for preventing major accidents and stepping up inspections and management of disaster and safety hazards.
The Communist Party of China Central Committee has held a symposium with non-CPC personages to seek opinions on the country's current economic situation and economic work for the second half of the year. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, presided over the symposium and delivered a keynote speech. Xi stressed the need to maintain a steady economic approach while pursuing progress to fully implement the new development philosophy and to accelerate efforts to foster a new development dynamic. He also called for enhancing the effectiveness of macro policies, expanding domestic demand, and promoting deeper integration of technological and industrial innovation. All right, for more insights, we're joined by Professor Liu Baocheng, the Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics at the University of International Business and Economics. Thank you so much for joining us on CGTN, Professor. So we're seeing the Political Bureau meeting set a clear tone for stepping up counter-cyclical adjustments with a more proactive fiscal policy and probably a accommodative monetary policy for the second half of this year. And let's also look at the National Bureau of Statistics here. The GDP deflator has just ended 12 consecutive quarters of negative growth for domestic demand, still faces notable headwinds. So given all of this, what specific policy measures can we expect to see in the third quarter? Your take?
Well, I think this is really a very positive sign because it shows that the deflationary factor is finally on the ease after 14 months. And now we would expect that the government overall will not only stabilize growth, but also to really to boost the quality of growth through several measures. One would be, as you mentioned, the fiscal policy will be catered towards more of the industrial capacity with high quality growth. In that, more of the government investment will be directed for the new industries such as renewable energy and also boost the infrastructure, and more importantly, to provide the social security for the general public by dealing with the healthcare issue and urban renewal for the house, and also to provide more of the job opportunities by boosting the private sector so that the younger generation can really be accommodated with a quality and also stable job. And monetary policy will be further on the ease, because to ensure abundant the liquidity is really the foundation, but that's not enough because, how to ensure that the money available in circulation will be channeled to those productive sectors, both for the traditional sectors for its new transformation with the digital aid, and also to boost more of the existing emerging industries to further strengthen their global competitiveness. And for that, that requires more of the training for younger generation and more investment in fundamental research.
Well, Professor, you talk about emerging sectors, and this meeting also listed accelerating the shift from old to new growth drivers as a top priority for the second half of the year, with new industries, as you mentioned, represented by AI, already contributing over 40% of the China's economic growth in the first half. So how do you think will the government balance the steady transformation of traditional sectors and rapid expansion of emerging sectors?
I think our top government is in a right cognitive position, is that it is not intended for the new emerging industries to completely replace the traditional sectors, because after all, the traditional sectors are there to provide a larger portion of the job opportunities, but rather to support those the traditional sectors with more of the investment in its rapid transformation through digitization. So this is something that's the government look at very clearly. And the other is that how we can really turn into the right type of synchronization in terms of the boosting the emerging sector while maintaining the traditional sector so that they can go into a virtuous loop. So this is very important. And behind that, I think more of the support is there for institutional reform, by unifying the Chinese marketplace, with the common rule to play, and also with common standard on the technical side. And the other is also to support the further opening of the Chinese marketplace by further cooperation with the rest of the world, so that we can really, continue to upgrade our technology through global cooperation, and also to diversify our marketplace on a global basis.
Exactly. Technology is definitely a new engine for growth here in China. Thank you so much, Professor Liu Baocheng, for sharing with us your insights. We really appreciate it. Well, for the past few years, China's export engine ran on EVs, lithium batteries, and solar panels, what we call the, quote, the new three. Now, with China still a world leader in those industries, a fresh trail is stealing the spotlight. AI, robotics, and innovative drugs, the aptly named the new three. And they are the new pillars of China's export engine. Chinese AI models and softwares are gaining global traction. Power applications across industries. Robotics exports are expanding into more markets, from factory floors to operating rooms. And in pharma, Chinese developed innovative drugs are making their mark on the global stage. Well, China is now home to over 2 million industrial robots, more than the rest of the world combined. And the momentum is clear. It is in the first half of this year, industrial robotic exports jumped nearly 19% year-on-year, now reaching 141 countries and regions. Huang Fei has more.
Chinese-made industrial robots are becoming an increasingly common sight in factories around the world. Manufacturers are running around the clock to keep up with demand. From welding and sorting to heavy lifting, Chinese robots are taking on a growing range of industrial tasks. So what's driving their popularity? Price is one factor. By producing key components in-house, manufacturers say they're able to cut costs while maintaining performance and reliability.
Since all core components, including motors and drives, are developed in-house, our collaborative robots are 30 to 40% cheaper. Demand is rising across Europe, North America, and Southeast Asia.
But price alone doesn't explain the boom. Chinese companies are exporting complete automation solutions, from hardware and software to system integration. Years of experience in applying robotics across 70-plus industries have become an export of their own. And the service doesn't stop after delivery.
Since January, our export orders have increased by more than 30%. With our after-sales team based in Southeast Asia, we can respond quickly to our customers' needs.
And demand could be set to grow even faster. For the first time, bionic robots and cleaning robots have been given their own customs codes, a sign that these rapidly expanding categories are entering the global mainstream. At the same time, manufacturers worldwide are shifting towards smaller production runs, greater product variety, and smarter manufacturing. That's driving the demand for intelligent and adaptable robots, and many see humanoids as the next step. It may look like robot fight night, but think of it as a job interview. These robots can keep their balance, recover from falls, and keep operating even after taking a huge hit, like losing a head. Those are exactly the kinds of capabilities manufacturers are looking for, and many are already being tested in Chinese factories.
AI and embodied intelligence will allow robots to be deployed in many more real-world scenarios.
There are still challenges ahead, from advanced chips and high-end sensors to building stronger global service networks. The race is far from over, but China has already built a strong head start. Huang Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
Well, China has reaffirmed its legitimate territorial rights over Huangyan Dao in the South China Sea in response to, quote, joint patrols in the waters by the Philippines, the United States, and Japan. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson Jiang Bin said on Thursday that the Chinese military will remain on high alert to safeguard the country's sovereignty. Take a listen.
Defense and security cooperation among relevant countries should not target at any third party, nor undermine regional peace and stability. Huangyan Dao is China's inherent territory. Several international treaties define the Philippines' territorial scope, and Huangyan Dao lies beyond that scope. This fact cannot be altered no matter what tricks the Philippines side plays, or whomever it courts for support. Its illegitimate attempts are doomed to fail. The Chinese military will always remain on high alert, resolutely counter any rights violation and provocative acts, take concrete actions to safeguard national territorial sovereignty and maritime rights and interests, and uphold peace and stability in the South China Sea.
Meanwhile, China strongly urged Japan to provide effective information about burial sites of the chemical weapons it abandoned in China during the World War II and speed up the disposal process. Beijing says Tokyo must fully fulfill its historical, political, and legal responsibilities. The remarks came on the 27th anniversary of China-Japan Memorandum on the destruction of the weapons.
China strongly urges Japan to faithfully fulfill its responsibilities and obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention and the China-Japan Memorandum, provide effective information on the locations of buried chemical weapons as soon as possible, accelerate the disposal process, and completely eliminate the harm caused by Japan's abandoned chemical weapons at an early date, so as to return a safe and clean environment to the Chinese people.
All right, time now to look at some other headlines around the world beyond Asia. Russian airstrikes killed at least 8 people in Ukraine on Thursday. The attacks came as President Volodymyr Zelensky returns from the United States, where he said President Donald Trump agreed to give Ukraine licenses to product Patriot missiles. Meanwhile, a warehouse operated by Russian top online retailer Wildberries caught fire in western city of Penza after a Ukrainian drone attack. 3 firefighters have died while battling the fierce wildfires sweeping across the Greek island of Crete. Authorities have ordered the evacuation of residents and tourists from Kenya, VC, and surrounding villages as strong winds continue to fuel the uncontrollable flames. The U.S. Federal Reserve has held the interest rate steady for a 7th straight meeting despite internal dissent over how to deal with persistent inflation. 3 Fed policymakers voted to raise interest rates as debate continues over monetary policy. Markets are also looking to September when another inflation report and new jobs data could strengthen the case for raising rates. We'll take a short break coming up. Tensions rise as the U.S. strikes Iranian Revolutionary Guards in a new wave of attacks. Rescue workers battle to reach survivors of the death toll from an earthquake in Japan's Kumamoto prefecture rises to 34. Stay with us.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Rescue workers are battling to reach survivors after a magnitude 7.1 earthquake in Japan's Kumamoto prefecture. The death toll has risen to 34, with at least 62 people injured. For the very latest, we go live to Shane Han in Kumamoto. For the very latest, good to see you, Shane. I hope everything is well there. Tell us, what is the latest of the rescue efforts?
Well, it's been more than 48 hours now since that initial 7.1 magnitude rocked this region of Japan. And if you could look over my right shoulder here, you can hear actually construction crews continuing to remove debris, working late into the night to try and find any trace of those unaccounted for that were in this large shopping mall when that earthquake occurred and the subsequent explosion that took so many lives here as well. But like you mentioned, the death toll here has more than doubled over the past 24 hours, and that number is expected to increase as the days go by. There are many obstacles that many of these search and rescue operations are facing, one of them mainly being the heat. It's extremely hot and humid right now in this part of the country. For the many that are displaced from their homes, in one city alone in the prefecture, there are up to 56,000 people without any energy or power or water at this point. In fact, we had an opportunity this afternoon to drive around the prefecture. The roads were not easy to go by. There were many buckled roads that were affected by the earthquake, as well as road closures. But as far as those that are displaced, we were able to go see a shelter that is housing many of these people that have not been able to stay at their home, not necessarily because their homes have been damaged or destroyed, but simply because they don't have access to clean running water or air conditioning because of the lack of power. So that's the situation, and that's why it's not just the death toll that you have to take into account. But nonetheless, officials say this still is a search and rescue operation until further notice, and that's going to be the main focus for these crews here.
Well, Shane, you talk about the obstacles and challenges there, including the heat, electricity. So what are the local officials saying about the recovery plans?
Yeah, as far as the recovery, it's focusing not just here at the shopping mall, but in a nearby city. There was the paper mill where there were mass casualties there. In fact, we had a chance to go visit there as well. What happened there was at the paper mill, a smokestack close to 100 meters high had toppled over, crushing many of the workers there. At least 8 workers lost their lives at that plant, and that was one of the hardest hit regions. But aside from the human toll, but you have to look forward into as far as the economic and the impact on the local industries here. Kyushu, this part of the country, is home to many large businesses. All 3 of the country's top automakers have a presence here. For instance, Honda Motors manufactures motorcycles here. They've halted production until Friday at the earliest. The other 2 automakers also experiencing delays in the supply chains. Also, the semiconductor industry, Sony Semiconductor as well as Tokyo Electron have experienced production delays, as well as TSMC, who have production facilities in this part of the country. So really, it's widespread. It's hard to determine the actual economic cost of this earthquake, but I think one resident said it best when he had experienced both the 2016 earthquake here and this current one, saying that no matter how prepared you are, you're never really prepared for these sort of natural disasters.
Exactly. Hope everything gets well soon. Thank you so much, Jane, for your reporting from Kukumoto Prefecture there. Iran's Tasnim news agency says Kuwait has launched U.S. missiles towards Iran. It follows an Iranian attack in northern Kuwait, which killed 1 person. It also comes after Saudi Arabia and the United States jointly attacked Iranian-backed militia in Iraq on Wednesday. Earlier, the U.S. military said it struck dozens of targets in Iran during a 2-hour operation overnight after it claimed to have intercepted a surprise Iranian attack. Iran state media reports a couple and their 2-year-old child were killed in an attack on Qushin Island. Iran's IRGC has warned countries assisting the United States of a harsh response, adding that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. Meanwhile, Pakistan's foreign ministry said the U.S.-Iran talks are ongoing to restore stability, particularly in the critical waterway. All right, for the very latest, we'll go live to Isan Kavani, who's live for us from the central city of Yazd. Good to see you, Isan. So what are we learning about those strikes by Kuwait on Iran?
Early Thursday, U.S. strikes resumed against multiple targets after a 4-day pause. The latest wave of attacks hit the southern port city of Bandar Abbas, the coastal city of Bushehr, Qeshm Island in the Persian Gulf, and other areas in the southwestern province of Khuzestan. According to Tasnim news agency, which is affiliated with the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, the IRGC, the U.S. strikes have accompanied by several missiles fired towards Iran from inside Kuwait. The report identifies the projectiles as American-made HIMARS missiles, but we don't know whether they were intercepted by Iran or reached their targets inside Iran. This is the first time Iranian official sources have reported direct attacks against Iran from an Arab country in the region, and this could significantly escalate tensions between Tehran and Kuwait. In retaliation, Iran launched ballistic missiles from multiple locations within Iran towards U.S. bases in the region, and at the same time, the IRGC reported that 2 oil tankers attempted to leave the unsafe route south of the Strait of Hormuz, but after a severe fire broke out on one of them, the vessels both quickly returned into the Persian Gulf. In fact, back to you.
Well, Isan, do we know the latest reported casualties and targets from the earlier U.S. attacks?
On Qeshm Island, a civilian building was struck today, resulting in casualties among a family member, both parents and their and one child killed and 2 other children wounded. Rescue operations started after the strikes to extract those trapped beneath the rubble on Qeshm Island. Iran has reported that at least 4 people were killed and 7 others injured in Thursday morning attacks alone. But according to the latest figures from Iran's health ministry, the ongoing hostilities over the past 3 weeks have so far claimed at least 65 lives and left more than 680 wounded across Iran. Iranian armed forces emphasized that unlike the conflict in March, during which U.S. casualties remained limited, the current round of fighting has resulted in several American casualties across the region, including in Jordan. The IRGC says Iran will not retreat in this war and that they strike by the United States or its allies will be met with strong retaliatory action.
All right. Thank you so much, Eason, for your updates from the central city of Yazd. We really appreciate it. Israeli settlers have been carrying out a growing number of attacks on villages in the occupied West Bank. And now, after a deadly shootout over the weekend, Israel is intensifying its crackdown. CGTN Francisca Maria Lorenzini has more.
Deadly Israeli settler attacks in the northern occupied West Bank have triggered the days of military raids, raising fears that escalating violence and the settlement expansion are reshaping the territory and making a future Palestinian state increasingly difficult to achieve. On Friday, dozens of Israeli settlers stormed the Palestinian village of Tal, southwest of Nablus, where a confrontation left 4 Palestinians and 2 Israeli soldiers dead. In the days that followed, Israeli forces carried out raids across dozens of Palestinian communities, while settler attacks were reported in several villages. In communities near expanding settlements and outposts, repeated attacks have made it increasingly difficult for Palestinians to access their land.
For about a year and a half, the settlements in our area have been expanding. They have confiscated more than 50% of Rabbah's land, especially in the eastern, southeastern, and northeastern areas.
Sami says attacks on farmers and shepherds have become a daily reality, affecting not only security, but also access to the land and livelihoods built around farming and livestock.
The settlers attack residents continuously. Their goal is to steal the livestock and prevent people from reaching their lands and shepherds from accessing their grazing areas.
Legal experts say that settler violence often operates alongside the military measures that restrict Palestinian access to land.
There was also always a division of labor where the settlers are the ones that, like the militias that go first. They create the friction, they create an alleged risk to their own life, which justifies the army coming and protecting, of course, the settlers.
The Israeli government rejects claims that settlement activity amounts to displacement, saying settlements are a matter of national security and that attacks by individuals are investigated. According to the United Nations, settler attacks have continued to rise in recent years, alongside the expansion and legalization of settlement outposts. Palestinians and rights groups warn that these changes are making territorial continuity in the West Bank, a key element of a future Palestinian state, increasingly difficult. The latest wave of Israeli settler violence, among the deadliest in recent months, has intensified concerns over the future of the Palestinian community across the West Bank. As Israeli settlements continue to expand, land is confiscated, and the movement restrictions tighten, many Palestinians fear further displacement and increasing violence. Francesca Maria Lorenzini, CGTN, East Jerusalem, West Bank.
All right, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.
Kung Fu is one of China's most recognizable cultural symbols, known to millions around the world through Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and the Shaolin Temple. Yet Kung Fu is about much more than martial arts. What can it reveal about Chinese culture, philosophy, and the way China sees the world? Join today's dialogue with Lawrence Brahm, an American author and documentary filmmaker who has lived in China for more than 4 decades.
Hi, Lawrence. Thank you for accepting our interview. You wrote that Kung Fu is the DNA of Chinese culture. That's a striking statement. So, what do you mean by calling it DNA of Chinese civilization, Chinese culture here?
Oh, it's very funny because a few years ago I was doing a talk and someone Chinese in the audience said, "Can you describe Chinese culture in 3 words?" And I said, "Ba Gua Xing Yi Tai Chi." Because what you're looking at here is an expression of a mindset. If you're looking at Tai Chi, the yin and the yang, this is all about balance. We don't think of yin and yang as black and white, good and bad. This is the duality thinking, which is very Western and emerged out of the feudal era in the West when everything was being put into black and white, good, bad, right, wrong, and this kind of, duality of thinking. When you look at yin and yang, they're one, they're not two. Everything's about balance. So you took a Tai Chi. I like to use Tai Chi as an example of this, of constant balance and rebalance. And then we say Xing Yi. Xing Yi is a martial arts style built around the 5 elements, Jin Mu Shui Huo Tu, of gold, wind, water, earth, and fire. And these are interactive. They are creating. Water will give rise to wood. Wood can stop water. It can stop floods. These are all interactive. And it comes down to balance. And rebalance. And reset the balance. And of course, Bagua is the 8 trigrams. And this is always, we see this around the yin and yang. It is a martial arts style. But that style is about change. It's about understanding the sequence of change and the realization through body, mind, and spirit that the only thing in the universe that actually doesn't change is the fact that change is always happening.
So for someone who never visited China, is it possible for them, to understand the Chinese Kung Fu via that? You will gain some understanding of the Chinese culture?
One of the things I've found is in the West, more and more people are learning different martial arts. And we have a saying, 天下武功出少林. And that means that all the martial arts